My guest this week is Sarah Haider. Sarah is the co-founder of Ex-Muslims of North America, an organization which advocates for the acceptance of religious dissent, promotes secular values, and aims to reduce discrimination of those who leave Islam. Also, according to her Twitter bio, she is Pakistani by birth and American by choice. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Dave. It's really good to be here.
So I'm so glad we finally connected because we've been going back and forth for a couple months, and we seem to be sort of swimming in the same circles, so to speak, lately. And I love that line. Let's just start with that line on your Twitter bio: Pakistani by birth and American by choice. Why'd you put that in there?
Well, what a lot of people don't know about me is that I am an immigrant, and I think that's a big part of my story. And in addition, I think that the American by choice means a lot because there are so many things about America that I love. There are so many values that are truly American that I think are wonderful. And in so many left-wing circles, it's unfashionable to say anything positive about America at all. And I hope to be able to swim against that tide a little bit.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that as an immigrant that's doing good things in this country, you're allowed to maybe kinda say something nice about America. Are you a neocon now?
Apparently, if you ask certain people, I am. But I think that, it took me so long to be able to get this citizenship. I only got it this year. And now I am fully an American citizen. And I feel so happy about it because this is a country I know so much about. And I've spent my entire, most of my life here. And I feel so strongly that I am part of the American fabric. And I want to contribute to it however I can.
Yeah, well, obviously I love all that. And where I really became familiar with you was back in May when you gave this speech at the American Humanist Association, which was really brilliant stuff. But I want to start first with a little bit of your history. When did you and your family come here from Pakistan? When did you sort of have your secular awakening, that kind of thing?
Well, I think I was about 8 years old when I came to America, and I remember this being a very strange new country for me. I remember learning the language, and I remember thinking it was very strange. I struggled a little bit in the first few years, but then there was so much about America that I thought was just wonderful. And I mean, these concepts that we have that we take for granted, like, individual liberty and right to free speech and all these things, I mean, these don't exist in any form in so many parts of the world. Yeah. So the fact that we have it, and I saw this with new eyes that, hey, here you can say anything. I mean, not anything truly, but in a way that isn't just comparable to anywhere else. And so anyway, I became really immersed into American government, and I thought it was really wonderful the way that, the separation of powers, the Bill of Rights, I thought that was just fantastic stuff. And when I was about 16, 15 years old, I began to have doubts about my faith. And a lot of it had to do with actually, just debating and seeing new viewpoints. I was on the debate team. That helped. What did push me a little bit, I think, was meeting what you would call militant atheists. The obnoxious type.
Oh, yeah. They're the worst, those militant atheists. Yeah. Violent.
Right. And the people that would, get in your face. And there was one guy in particular, I knew a few, but there was one guy in particular who would print out verses from the Quran that were just horrible, right? These horrible verses, and he would just hand them to me and not say a word and just be like, look at this. And, this was my first time really looking into it. And I think this is the case for so many Christians and Jews and Muslims who leave religion, that they were like, well, when I really looked into it, it didn't make a lot of sense, or there was some horrible stuff in there.
Right.
And for me, it was kind of a quest to prove these atheists wrong, And I started doing research online because I was sure that Islam was the way, and Islam was so good for women and women's rights, and all of this stuff could be explained when looked into context. And then I looked at the context. Sometimes I made things worse. Yep. So then I thought, okay, well, time to admit defeat. And it didn't really take me a long time before I thought, this just doesn't make any sense. And It's not honest for me to say that I am a Muslim, given that I know all this now.
Yeah, I love that you described the militant atheists. What did they have? They had photocopied paper. That was their weapon. You know what I mean? The other extremists, they have some more serious stuff. Like, you're going to get a paper cut, that's pretty much going to be the worst thing that's going to happen to you.
Right, and it's amazing to me. That's all that it took, really. It's just here. This is what you believe. This is the book. This is your holy book. That's all it took.
Yeah.
As far as that terminology, the coming out thing, that's so common in ex-Muslim circles. That's what we use. We say, "Have you come out to your family? You know, are you out of the closet?" That is the language that we use because that's the reality of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, what I did was I would just have debates with my family here and there about specific issues, and that's how they sort of got the message. I don't know if I explicitly said it for the first couple of years, but I was lucky. I'm very lucky in that I have a truly liberal father. And by liberal, I mean, okay, I still wasn't allowed to wear certain kinds of clothing, right? I still couldn't wear shorts in the house. I still couldn't have, boyfriends or anything like that or date. I was expected to get an arranged marriage and everything.
Wait, where's the liberal part coming? It's coming?
Right, but that's liberal. It's liberal in the sense that my father allowed me to read what I wanted to read, and he didn't question it too much because he thought I would end up in the right place at the end. So that was a sense of freedom, and I only had to fight for maybe a year or two to be able to go away for college. So that was my liberal father.
God, it's so funny how terms and words really mean a lot. You know, before you say something nice about America, the left will, say you're a neocon, and in this context, you describe your liberal father, but you couldn't wear shorts and that kind of stuff, and yet clearly within that space he was liberal. It's amazing.
He was very liberal, and he was very liberal in the sense that he gave me a sort of dignity as a woman that I think that wasn't given. It isn't given by many Muslim men to their daughters and to their wives and even mothers. And so I consider myself lucky. I know that sounds interesting, but I do consider myself very lucky that my childhood was similar to maybe what very conservative, almost fundamentalist Christians would have, and that I consider myself lucky that I wasn't forced to wear the hijab. I did wear it for a short amount of time by choice, but it wasn't forced upon me. So it is interesting what we consider liberal and what's considered liberal anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because, there are so many stories you hear about, ex-Christians leaving, you hear about ex-Jews leaving, Orthodox Judaism, something like that, where they're then considered heroes on the left. They left this dogmatic conservative ideology, but you don't hear about many people like you, and I've recently connected with a bunch. And it's like you're so obviously standing up for the basic liberal values that we all talk about all the time.
Right. It's so bizarre to be in this space. I mean, I feel strange that I'm here because I feel like I have enemies, like people who just don't like what I'm saying for one reason or another. And my narrative is like you said, a classically liberal one.
Right.
And it's something that on the face of it should be something every liberal should support. But there is such a tendency on the left to protect Muslims, to protect them from bigotry. And these fears of bigotry, I would say, I mean, they're real, right? Yeah. They're not making this up. It is a fear, and it's a real fear. But the response has been what I would call reactionary. It's interesting because they say the reactionary right. And I think but your response to Islam is also very reactionary. You're also not looking at it from an objective point of view.
Yeah, well, it seems to me we've got the reactionary right and the regressive left. But I want to hold that for a second because I want to talk about the speech that you gave because it was really wonderful, and I saw it blowing up on Twitter, and a zillion people were sending it to me, and I watched it again yesterday in preparation for this. And, we talk about this coming out process, but you sort of referenced that in this. It seemed to me like, obviously, without knowing you, and this is the first time we spoke, but it seemed like your entire life had led up to that very moment. Am I being very dramatic there?
Well, it was something that I was extremely nervous doing. I mean, and I think it showed in the video it showed that I was nervous, and I was. Because I felt, ever since I've been doing this activism, now it's been 3 years that I've been doing ex-Muslim activism, I am blindsided by the reaction of the left. I really thought, and this is something that I hear from activists everywhere. I hear that they thought they would come here and they would talk to people on the left and they would find allies. They would find people who were willing to support them and were willing to give at least moral support, if not anything else, but they would find their brothers. And I found that in so many ways, people I considered my brothers and my sisters in this struggle have overlooked me for what seems like a very political reason. And what I was feeling, especially around the time I was giving that speech, it was after the Charlie Hebdo shootings, and I was feeling extremely disheartened by even the secular community overall. That there were so many people that were saying, well, you know, that in some ways it could be justified, and Islamophobia, and all this stuff that didn't really make a lot of sense, and I was feeling abandoned. And so I thought, you know, they gave me this opportunity to have this speech, so I'm going to just speak my mind. I think maybe they expected me to talk a little bit mostly about my organization, but I ended up sort of hijacking that conversation and talking about that.
Yeah, well, first off, I mean, I recommend that everyone that's watching this should absolutely watch that, because we can only touch on some of what you did there. But the reaction from the left, you know, it's a lot of what we've spent this show talking about. And the more that I try to get away from it, you know, I've tried to address it so that I could move away from it. I want these people to understand that someone like you, that someone like me, that we are standing up for liberal values. But it's not just that they've ignored you. In a lot of ways, these people have sort of actively tried to undermine you, don't you think?
Right, and it's not just undermining, it's sliming, right? And there's people that have questioned my agenda and what am I doing this for? I mean, I'm not gaining anything from this. I mean, in a lot of ways, this comes at a high personal cost, and I think it's for many ex-Muslims that speak out. But there are so many people that are very intent on painting me as a right-wing shill. And I get this all the time, and I even get this from people who I thought would be my allies, from atheists, from leftists. So it's... What
do you make of that tactic, just that general tactic, that it's not about what you say? Because if anyone was to listen to that speech, or hopefully anything that we're going to talk about here, I'm going to guess that you're going to line up with liberal values 99% of the time. So it's rarely about what you say, it's about who you are and that you don't fit into their neat little box of what a Muslim should believe, which is crazy to me.
Well, I actually disagree with you. I think it is what you say, in the sense that if you're talking negatively about Islam at all, from on any perspective,
right.
It doesn't matter if you're fueled by human rights or fueled by bigotry or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you are touching negatively on Islam on any level, you are a bigot.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how you say it, because a lot of people say this to me. They say, well, what would you tell, you know, Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris? You know, if you think there's a way they can say their critique that would be beneficial. And what I tell them is, or what I ask them instead is, well, can you think of somebody who has directly critiqued Islam in a direct way that has gotten away with it, that hasn't been called a bigot by somebody? You know, what is a right way of saying this? Point me to an example of somebody who's critiquing Islam and has been able to, you know, get away and still retain their liberal credentials.
Yeah. Leaving a religion, any religion's tough, but particularly tough to leave Islam. And then when you couple that with all the stuff related to being a woman, and being a secular woman in America in 2015 isn't that easy sometimes. How does that play into how you live?
Well, let me start by saying there's so many people that I'm connected to through the organization and through meeting a bunch of ex-Muslims. I mean, I don't think it'd be a stretch to say that I probably know more ex-Muslims than most people, you know, in the world, you know, will ever know.
Right.
But and what I hear consistently from a lot of women, that the reason that they left the religion was because of the treatment of women, and a lot of it just didn't make any sense, and they didn't appreciate. They felt that they weren't being given the same kind of dignity as men, and when they looked at it from that perspective, things changed. Feminism had a lot to do with it, which is very interesting when we talk about today's feminism here, because I haven't really found the feminist allies in the West that I thought I would find. I expected for them to be the first people to run to my defense, and a few have, but a small few. I expected there to be a big rally with you know, feminists from all over to come and talk about these issues, but I haven't found that to be the case at all. It's very disheartening.